Good to be back. And it's good to be back with us tonight. I am Mr. Julian Sands.
Oh. Hello. It's very, very nice to be here with you, and thank you for coming to listen to our conversation.
Thank you.
And we're going to get into it because you have 157 credits currently, and we're going to talk about every single one of them here today. So we'll keep it casual. This is one of the earliest panels of the day, so we'll just have a big group conversation. But I want to start off asking everyone this year, what were the films that inspired you to want to become an actor? What horror films, what really inspired you first?
Well, when I was a child, I loved British hammer horror films. You know, particularly things like The Devil Rides Out, with Christopher Lee, The House of the Seven Gables, and Night of the Demon. And of course, I mean, the wonderful Wicker Man. I thought there was something so thrilling and kind of sexy and scary at the same time, and it was a dream that I might at some point become a part of a production of such things. But other films which were profound for me with Laurence Olivier in Richard III, the film Zulu with Michael Caine and Stanley Baker. Those I found romantic and dramatic. And Olivier as Richard III, in some ways, was as, you know, it was kind of like Warlock. I mean, his charm and his charisma in this sort of quintessentially evil being. But made very attractive. I mean, to me, as an 8-year-old. So,
yeah.
Those are some.
And you of course did go on that dream came true. You went on to star in a number of your own horror films. Of course, Argento's Phantom of the Opera, Arachnophobia, and certainly, last but not least, Warlock and Warlock the Armageddon. What is the attraction as an actor to genre? You talked about playing villains. What is it?
Well, I mean, I don't think of films as being genre. I mean, there is this sort of great umbrella which describes anything. I just think this films are stories. And what is called genre quite often has really good writing, really colourful characters. Really, it's much closer to Shakespeare or Baroque theatre because you've got this fantastic, larger-than-life language quite often and scenarios. It's delicious, and very often with what I would call more straightforward romantic drama or drama, things aren't quite as colourful and exciting. So there used to be great stigma, when I was trained at drama school and started working on films. And I did some pretty serious films in the first years I was working as an actor. And everybody said, when I was sent the Warlock script, everybody said, no, you mustn't do this. It's a B movie. But listen, everything's a B movie, depending on your point of view. And I think some of the most creative and exciting talents in cinema have been nurtured and demonstrated by what people would call genre films. And so I've never been afraid of doing what people tell me not to do. And it's also if you're an actor, I don't want to know what I'm going to be doing next month or in 3 months. I want to be doing something different. As it is, this last, what's called the COVID period, this last couple of years, I've done 7 movies on 4 continents, all of them different, all of them required flights on empty planes mostly. One of them was very serious film drama with Mike Figgis in Hong Kong, which required 21 days in quarantine in a room where you're not allowed in the corridor, you can't open the window,
Oh my God.
you're in the room, and with a kind of monitor on you. It was pretty draconian. But I knew that it wasn't like a surprise. I arrived in Hong Kong airport and was told this. I knew this going in. But I embraced it as a part of the experience. I thought, well, this is in 3 weeks, I'm going to be alone. I'll accept this as a meditation, as a retreat. And I didn't, there was a well-stocked minibar, but I didn't drink. I just, I was myself. It was very interesting. I did a film in Morocco, in the sub-Saharan desert with John Malkovich, my friend, playing Seneca. He was playing Seneca, I was playing one of Seneca's friends. It was the last night of the Roman philosopher Seneca's. So these books are a bit highfalutin. But I also did a film in Cyprus called The Ghosts of Monday, which is about a group of people making a paranormal documentary, trying to debunk the paranormal, this haunted hotel in Cyprus. And I was the leader of the investigating team. Sort of, hello, and here we are in Cyprus. But then, of course, things do happen. I won't say anything about it, but that's a film which will be out later this year. I think they're hoping for Halloween, The Ghosts on Monday. And another film which will fit in very well with the reason we're here this weekend is called The Piper. And The Piper is a retelling of the story of the Pied Piper, and about how his music has somehow taken over an orchestra. And I'm the principal conductor, so I got to conduct, and it's beautiful. I mean, they're still in post-production, but they're trying to rush. They're trying to get that ready for Halloween. Whether or not they will, I don't know. But that's fantastic, the Piper. So, and then there were other films which were more straightforward dramas, which I enjoyed, but they wouldn't necessarily fit into this convention. My point being that as an actor, I'm always looking for something different to what I've just done, an adventure. And also the adventure involves travel. Those films, I said, 4 continents. One was in New Orleans, one was in Morocco, Hong Kong, Bulgaria, Cyprus, one in LA with Glenn Danzig called Death Rider and the House of the Vampires. Devon Sawa, who is here, played Death Rider. And I played the Count of the House of the Vampires. It's kind of fun, and so on and so forth. I mean, it's just, I've been very, very lucky as an actor for the last 40 years. Unbelievable that people ask me to do things I find interesting, and they're not always going to be successes. But if the experience is fruitful, that's what matters to me. I mean, you just sort of look to what is potentially an adventure, what's fulfilling, what's... I spend a lot of time climbing mountains, and when you go to a mountain, it's not about... People talk about conquering mountains. Nobody conquers mountains. For me, it's about being with the mountain, in the environment of the mountain. That's where you find the expression and the peace and the adventure and the challenge. It's just, and sometimes you do climb to the top, and sometimes you have to bail off a route because the weather turns bad, or because the conditions are dangerous, or because you just run out of gas, whatever, or food, as has happened. I have the same approach to my job as an actor.
Yeah.
So that was a long answer.
No, I love it. And I mean, that adventure is taking you all over, you know, obviously, but it's also taking you to work with, you know, some of the great auteurs of the genre, of course, Argento, Cronenberg, and Naked Lunch. Is there an appeal there to do you have with your kind of approach to acting that you always want to do something different? Do you have that same idea of like, oh, I'm a really big Cronenberg fan, or I'm a really big Argento fan, I'd love to work with them?
Well,
because those are two guys that have very distinct approaches,
yeah,
and,
sure.
and they're certainly known for their body of work, and you fit kind of right in with both of them.
Well, it's, you know, it's true. There are directors I admire, in both known for genre things and for other areas of filmmaking, and I've been lucky to work with many of those.
Yeah.
But sometimes, you know, it's the people I like to work with very often are people making their first film.
Yeah.
Because it's very hard to make a film. It's very hard to be a director. If it was easy, everybody would be a film director. But the time, the effort, the work, the creativity, the tenacity required. One of the films I didn't mention, but I'll mention it now, for instance, was Boxing Elena. When that was first sent to me, I thought, well, this is like reading the most beautiful love story. It's like a sort of something out of Grimm's fairy tales. It never crossed my mind that it was, I knew it was intense, but I didn't think of it as having anything negative about it. And we made this film, which is kind of like an opera. And there was great hostility to the film when it came out. It was very, people were very derisory about it. And yet, so many people this weekend want to talk about Boxing Elena, and people who weren't born at the time it was made. So it endures. I mean, probably much more relevant and contemporary now than at the time it was first distributed. Another film I did last year, this year, in January and February, I spent in Rome. I was sent a script about 15 months ago by a young woman, Italian, called Body Odyssey. And Body Odyssey, I read it, and it was like incredible. It was the sort of Frankenstein story. It was about a man who is seeking to create his idea of the perfection of a woman bodybuilder. I mean, it's so set in the world of female bodybuilding. And it's about, but what it's really about is the sort of addiction and loneliness and personality fissure. It's very Cronenberg-y.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
And I, you know, this came from a lady called Grazia Tricarico. And so I got somebody to set up a call and say, look, I love this script, and the fact that you've written it tells me that you're the right person to direct it, but do you have anything you can show me of your work? So she sent me a couple of her student films, which reinforced the idea that she had a very original cinematic view. I'm competent and confident, and I have no doubts about doing this, even though a lot of my, you know, the people who guide me had doubts. It kept being postponed because of COVID issues and finance issues. We filmed it in Rome in January and February, and I think it would, although it's not strictly a genre film, I think it would fit into our shared sensibilities very readily, and I hope it'll be out next year.
Yeah.
Body Odyssey.
Body Odyssey.
Cool movie, dark and strange. And so we're talking about challenges. In my personal life, me as Julian, you know, I have a real, it's difficult for me to sort of, that overly built musculature, I don't find attractive. All right? I don't look at it and think that's a vision of, you know, some whatever. And in men or women. And so to be asked to play somebody for whom that is their dream,
Right.
and the character of, she's called Mona, was played by a real bodybuilder. I mean, a lady, a Swiss lady, she had worked professionally as a boxer, and then she'd become a bodybuilder. So she'd been doing this for 25 years. I mean, she could have crushed me like a walnut. But to get to a point of comfort where I massage her, I inject her, we have showers together. We're not lovers, but clearly I love her, and we swim together. The director, there was a scene where it says Mona and Kurt, I play Kurt, are having coffee and chatting. And the director said, "Hey, Julian, you know, that scene having coffee, I think much more interesting if you are in a jacuzzi, no? Naked." So I said, yeah, sure, Greg. So, you know, it means, so, because to me that is about the most uncomfortable thing you could describe, and yet, as Kurt, with Mona, the object of my kind of belief, it made complete sense. And anyway, that is a little illustration of. So there are 3 films to look out for next year: Body Odyssey, The Piper, and Ghosts of Monday. And if the Figures film, do you know Mike Figures? Is he on your radar leaving Las Vegas? Probably.
Yes, which you were also incredibly.
I've done. This was my 9th film with Mike Figures. I mean, sometimes main roles, sometimes just little cameos. But this is a pretty kinky film. It's called Mother Tongue, and you know, so that's one to see. So,
Can't wait. I do want to.
The one is, I still, you know, I still love working. If I'm missing, you know, as much as I did when I left drama school, more so, because when you leave drama school and you're sort of trying to get a career, there's so much which is preoccupying and distracting. Ambition is a very good thing. It's what you need to be ambitious to work, but it also can get in the way because you're always looking at what other people are doing. What are they being paid? Why didn't I get that role? And then when you do get some success and celebrity, there's a lot of things that come with that which you're not necessarily prepared for, and trust me, many distractions from the essence of the work. But then you get to an age and a level of experience where, you know, you're only focused on the work you're doing and living in the moment, and nothing else, everything, all those things which used to be distractions just cease to have any relevance. And it's a wonderful liberation. It gives you a kind of, you know, freedom in yourself, freedom in the work, which usually comes at about the time in your life when your friends who are in civilian jobs are retiring, and then you suddenly get these sort of, I don't know, openness, I would call it. So that's what, you know, keeps. So my enthusiasm and my curiosity is certainly as active as it was 40 years ago.
Which we love, because that means we just get to continually see you and do new things.
Clinging to the wreckage.
I do want to talk about Warlock. I think Warlock is an interesting film because it came at a time, I mean, what more could you ask for as an actor to get to play this character that goes on to be kind of iconic and part of a franchise that has a fandom behind it. But Warlock's interesting because it came at a time in the late 80s, 90s where slasher was really the genre, and yet you have this almost throwback to Gothic, or certainly some of the Hammer films that you mentioned. I was reading about it that when, of course, Steve Miner, who directed it, no stranger to genre with Friday the 13th and House and Halloween H2O. But David Toho, who wrote it, also no stranger, went on to be a kind of director in his own right. I read that when you first got the script, that the character was written kind of far more misunderstood and sympathetic, and was kind of became more and more villainous as they developed the film.
No, I did. That's not how I remember it.
Yeah.
I think the film we shot was pretty close to the script I first received.
Yeah.
When it was sent to me, I was told Sean Connery was playing the witch hunter, Redfern, which obviously he wasn't. But Richard E. Grant did a very fine job, and I knew him a little bit. But no, I don't think there was so much departure. I think, if anything, the reverse is true.
Yeah.
That actually, the script I read was much more that the Warlock was this, very black and white evil villain. And what I tried to do in the work, and a little bit with David and Steve, was bring out more humor,
yeah.
more charm,
yeah.
more flair. That's what. So that's maybe what you read at the long end of the stick.
Yeah.
But what I would also say about Warlock, and I was talking to somebody this morning at the table, was they were saying how much they loved watching it on the VHS because it still was lovely and grainy.
Right.
But of course, Warlock was shot on film, whereas today everything's shot on digital, and all the effects were analog. I mean, there were no special effects. Everything, there was a bit of green screen, but it was very, very clunky. All the flying shots, we were in harnesses on wires. There was something, yes, authentically closer to Wicker Man,
yeah.
Hammer.
Yeah.
And it's true that, slasher movies were very popular at that time, it was emerging. I'm not really, I have a hard time with slashing and gore. The kind of genre films I prefer, more Let the Right One In, or The Others, or The Witch. I like Blair Witch too. I mean, in other words, things which are emotional and psychological.
Yeah.
I've never seen Nightmare on Elm Street, any of them, although I was having a drink with Robert Englund last night. I'm aware of them. I've never seen Texas Chainsaw. I've never seen Halloween or what's the other one? Halloween and
Friday the 13th.
Friday the 13th. Because they just creep me out. But there are many genre films of a more subtle persuasion which I enjoy.
You and Robert both share something in that you're both in quite infamous takes on Phantom of the Opera. I would love to see that conversation.
Well, we talked about it last night. I should have been there because we talked about Dario and we talked about that story. Certainly when I worked with Dario was very keen to try and convey the essence of Gaston Leroux's novel. Even though he said, look, I don't want the Phantom disfigured. But famously, the Phantom all sort of burned up, and he wanted the Phantom to be disfigured internally, to be sort of his own. He had a psychological word for it, but which I was relieved about because it meant much less time in makeup. If you talk about Argento and Cronenberg, they both of them in their way. Argento is like a monk. You know, you might expect a sort of horror maestro to be, you know, wild and crazy and grisly, but he was like a sort of, it was like a monastic figure. Very, very aesthetic, very quiet, and seemed to be always in prayer. Cronenberg, like being with a librarian or a teacher of English. He was so sort of mild-mannered and quiet. And when we made Naked Lunch, I mean, William Burroughs was around like this sort of phantom hovering at the side of the set. But David was, you know, very gentle. I did a film with Ken Russell called Gothic, which is about
Yes.
Byron Shelley
Yes.
and Mary Shelley and the birth of Frankenstein and that whole crazy weekend. And Ken Russell at that time in his life did kind of represent the film. I mean, he was wild and crazy and angry and shouted a lot, but I respected Ken, I mean, very much, and would if he was around, happily work with him again. But he had his demons which got the better of him, and they weren't filtered in any way. Yeah. If you wanted a nice quiet supper, have a supper with Cronenberg or Argento. But if you wanted something phantasmagorical, go out with Ken.
I do want to ask about one more film, and then I want to take it out to you guys, because I'm sure you have some great questions. But I love Arachnophobia. Speaking of movies that are pure B-movie, but you know, through Spielberg producing and the great Frank Marshall stepping, you know, behind the camera for once, they kind of swapped roles there. That film, to me, you know, it's one of those films that definitely has a cult status, but it kind of harkens back to those creature features that I think we saw, like after Willard, the great Bruce Davidson is here. It burns in you in that, like, when I'm in the shower, I still hesitate when I reach out for the towel because of the spider on the towel rack. Like, you know, what was that experience like? And did you have a fear of spiders that you had to face going in?
No, I fortunately, I'm totally comfortable with spiders. And I mean, the scene where I die in the barn, they wanted this shot of spiders running all over my face. Well, they tried to do it, but you know, the spiders did just run away, so they could never get more than one or two. So they said, look, we've got this idea. How do you feel about it? We want to put a fencing mask over your face and cut a hole in it so we can drop all the spiders in, and then at the very last minute take the fencing mask away. But they said it'll take, you know, it could be a while whilst you're sitting there. You get comfortable with that? Sure, I said. Happy to do that. And you know, the one thing, I was playing dead, so it made me stay very still. Because there must have been something like 60 or 70 spiders, all of them with 8 legs, you know, running around on my nostrils and eyes and mouth. And I just thought, if I can take my breathing down to about minimal, it'll be fine. And you know, it was a Zen moment. And then, so they got everything going, everything ready, and then action. And then a hand came in and took the fencing mask away, and they got the shot. Well, they never get it first time. They probably ended up doing it, you know, several times in different lenses. But I couldn't have done that if I had arachnophobia. Now, I've met many people who were freaked out by the film and are still freaked
Yeah.
out by it, because if they didn't have arachnophobia when they saw it, they should have.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that's me for sure. But you're so great in that, as well as Jeff Daniels and John Goodman, and so it's just such a great.
Wonderful cast, and it was a joy to work with Frank. I mean, Frank sort of has gone back to his day job of producing, but he was such a pleasure to work with.
Yeah. All right, let's kick it out to you guys. I'm sure you have some great questions. Yeah, right here.
Yes, I was wanting to find out in Rose Red, how did you switch from the villain to the nice guy?
In Rose Red, the dynamic of switching back and forth.
That character, I thought of that character as a sort of James Bond of Ghostbusters, paranormalists. That he had a sort of confidence and a suaveness. But in the end, he sort of sacrificed himself to protect. I forgot the character's name, but Judith Ivey played her as the Thing came along the carpet. I enjoyed that very much, and I probably work much more than you might know on other things, so it's not such a big deal switching from genre to genre, whether you're being romantic or action or horror. It's for me, they're just characters, they're just people I'm playing, and it's the trappings around the film and your perception that sometimes invests the characters with particular characteristics.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I was really glad to hear that you're working with Mike Figgis again after loss of sexual innocence.
Oh, you saw that?
It's
wow.
a weird DVD to have, but I remember seeing it at the art house theater. I mean, it's like so glad that you're working with Figgis.
For those of you who don't know, the loss of sexual innocence used to be called the loss. It was Mike Figgis made this film, which is very autobiographical. It's sort of memories, dreams, reflections of the filmmaker. He was called Nick, but could have been called Mike, and interwoven with a sort of Adam and Eve story.
And he did all the music for that.
He did everything, and it was a sort of road movie. We shot in the north of England, a little bit in Italy, and then into the Sahara Desert. And I've seen it and like it very much. You've seen it, and that's probably about it. And you've seen it. Well, there we are.
But you did a film with Paul Schrader and Dennis Hopper.
Yes,
Witch Hunt.
Witch Hunt.
And I'm always amazed that it's one of the Paul
Finn
Schrader.
Maxer.
I just watched it the other night when I was
Okay.
coming here. I was like, God, I just forget how amazing that was.
Yeah. Well, Dennis was a very cool guy. I got to know him quite well, and he and I did a fashion, a runway shoot for Yohji Yamamoto in Tokyo the following year. So we hung out quite a bit. I like Dennis, and but Paul Schrader, Witch Hunt. It was made for HBO. Was it Showtime? HBO. Okay. It was a great pleasure and kind of weird. And I'm surprised that it's not better known, because it was fairly mainstream. But nobody ever asked for Witch Hunt photos or and it was a cool experience.
You wore the eye and everything.
Yeah, I had the milky eye of Finn.
Speaking of Mike and leaving Las Vegas, have you seen Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent yet with Nick Cage?
No, I haven't.
Leaving Las Vegas, obviously it's a very meta self-referential movie about his career in which Nicolas Cage plays Nick Cage, and Leaving Las Vegas plays into it in a very funny way. So I was curious to hear your thoughts on it. But
I'll have to be on an aeroplane, I think, to...
There you go. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Yes.
Can you hear me okay, sir?
I can, yeah.
Well, it's not a question, it's just a comment. I wanted to say I have you in part to thank for the greatest movie-going experience I've ever had. When I was a child, I went with my brother to see Arachnophobia, and he had the misfortune of sitting in a chair that the seat was the back of it was broken, and the scene at the end where the spider jumps out at Jeff Daniels' character, he pushed back so hard that he actually flipped out of a chair. He was uninjured, but for years it gave me fuel to tease him about that.
I hope he didn't have a bag of popcorn. Funny.
It's like the William Castler Tingler seats. Back here.
You've done major motion pictures, and you've also done made-for-network TV films. What's the difference as far as the production goes for those kind of films?
Well, TV films tend to be made quicker, so you don't necessarily get the consideration in terms of time and preparation that you might get for a sort of cinema film. That's the biggest consideration. Sometimes, too, with TV films, because they need them fast as product, not as much consideration goes into the refinements and subtleties of scripts. But, you know, I never judge something according to how it's been made or who's making it, because if a film is seen, it's generally seen on a monitor, not in theatres anymore. I mean, some form of streaming or a domestic device, and that's okay. So I don't make a judgment of that. But if there was a single consideration, it's time and I guess money. For instance, when we did Gilbert the Dragon Tattoo, David Fincher, he wanted 50 takes. He got 50 takes, and which he regularly did. But happily, I love doing many takes. I know colleagues of mine go crazy after 5 or 6, but the more, the better for me. But he would never have that possibility if he'd be making that as a small movie.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, we have time for a couple more. Let's go right here.
Since I was a young girl, and my friend here also a young girl.
But you are a young girl.
She is. Yes. I had to bring her into it. Yeah. We see you and have seen you for many years as one of the most beautiful sex symbols in horror.
Yes.
You're a gorgeous man, and you have been a gorgeous man for, what did you say, 40 years? The entire career that you've been in. How do you see yourself as a sex symbol, and how has that affected your career?
He sees himself in a hot tub drinking coffee.
I am the first in line to watch that. Yes.
If you stop by my table later, I'll show you a couple of stills on my iPhone. But
We have a long line later.
There are many. What you're asking is really, it's a private conversation which would take long, because I obviously don't see myself as you're describing, but it's very gratifying to hear that there are pockets of the audience. So thank you.
Drinks later? You said private,
So
right?
you had your hand up as well, but I'm afraid of what this follow-up question is going to be. But go ahead, take it away. You're twins, so you both get to ask your question.
Oh, well, mine was a little bit different, but I agree with her. I know it's hard to choose, but out of all your films, do you have a favorite that you've done?
A good question, but no, I don't. And if I say there's a favorite, it's usually the one I have just finished working on, or the one I'm about to start working on. So the one I just finished most recently was Body Odyssey. But of course, I mean, I've had such a range of rich and pleasurable experiences working in over 50 countries, and whether it's Room with a View or whether it's Warlock or whether it's boxing or Loss of Innocence. It's a continuum for me. It's all, this lady.
Yeah. Hi. Yeah.
Hi. So I think like everyone, when we think of Naked Lunch, at least for me, it's just like the practical effects are some of the most memorable things. Do you remember how you first felt when you saw your likeness as a big, like, freaky, fragmented monster?
Yeah, it was very disturbing. But also that film, you know, it's so subversive, so weird. It would never get made today.
Although I will say, I have seen the trailer for Cronenberg's next film.
Yeah, and the one in Cannes. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
Incredible, yeah.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Kind of piggybacking on all your films that you've done, that you've enjoyed, the variety, is there still a movie or a story that you would like to portray? Say if somebody came to you and said, Julian, what movie type have you not made that you've always dreamed about? Fantasy, science fiction, horror, comedy?
No, I understand the question, but I'm a reactor. Most actors are reactors. They're not really actors. So I'm not a protagonist. I'm not a producer. I like responding to material. I would never have come up with the idea of a Frankenstein-like coach training a female bodybuilder to be Miss Body Universe. It wouldn't have occurred to me. But then when I read it and I talked with the director and then we were filming, it seemed completely inevitable. And that happens all. There are characters I've played. I mean, somebody asked about a film called Vatel, which was about the court of Louis XIV in 17th century France. I would never have thought about playing Louis XIV, but when we made this film, Roland Joffé, it seemed inevitable. And I think that's always I respond to invitations. And I don't set out to generate my own activities and my own projects. I'm lucky. That's why I say I'm lucky. People do, you know, bring ideas to me, and then I respond to them.
You know they got a great actor to work with.
Well, you know.
Well, that's we do have to wrap up here, but if we have 3 more questions, we can go real quick here. Well, there's a lot more than 3 that just popped up. All right, we'll do these really quick. So rapid fire. Yes, sir.
Are there any roles you've had to turn down for one reason or the other that maybe later you regretted and you thought maybe that would have been a good one?
You know, if you're a working actor, you're always being asked to do things which you're not necessarily available for. And I have had to turn things down, but I never regret that. I mean, it's just an aspect of, you know, people asked you to dance, but you're already dancing, and so, you know, hopefully catch them on the next dance.
All right, we'll go these last 2 because these were up one at.
Can you talk quickly about your time on Smallville?
I enjoyed it. He said quickly, I've got to be quiet. I enjoyed it. Tom was a joy.
How'd you end up working with Jackie Chan?
Well, I was asked to play. I would never have thought I want to do a film with Jackie Chan, but it was great being in Hong Kong and Bangkok and, you know, learning some moves. I got a lot of Jackie Chan stories. Now isn't the time.
All right, last question right here.
So over the 40 years of acting, what process or what do you enjoy about being an actor? How's that changed?
Well, I think, you know, the big change is what I tried to describe earlier, of just the freedom you find through experience, confidence, becoming grown up, becoming an adult. That's the great simplification of one's life. Technical things, of course, you know, you learn a lot, but you're always learning, always learning. and it's important to always be open to, and it's collaboration from other people, from the director, from other actors, from the script, from the location you're reacting, and I think just to be open, to continue to be open. I mean, I do have friends and actors I know who don't stay open, because I think that happens too when they're on long TV shows, and it's got to turn into an office job in some way, very well paid office job. But I've never done that. So.
Well, that's the perfect note to end on. Sir, thank you so much. We'll be back on the table the rest of the day and tomorrow, so if you have a question or you